Good evening, and thank you for joining tonight's virtual public meeting hosted by Arapahoe County. My name is Jason Reynolds, and I will be the moderator for the event tonight as we talk about proposed oil and gas regulations in Arapahoe County. First, let's talk about what you can expect for the next hour, and again, thank you so much for joining us. Tonight's event will be interactive and informative with numerous opportunities for you to engage with us. We want to hear from you, so if you've joined online, please submit your questions below the video feed. We will queue those up and read them aloud for panelists to answer. If you've dialed in on the phone, press *3 to connect with one of our operators who will get you in the queue to ask your question live. And for anyone joining on Facebook Live, enter questions in the comment thread and we'll read those aloud. We'll get to as many questions as possible tonight. We are recording this meeting to make it available on the project webpage for those unable to attend this evening. Our goal here is to give a brief recap of the ongoing process since the passage of Colorado Senate Bill 181. That bill granted additional authority to county governments to enhance oil and gas regulations in their communities. We will also present the regulations that are now in draft form. Thanks for the feedback from the community and many stakeholder groups. And finally, we want to hear more from you. What questions and comments do you have about the draft regulations for oil and gas development in unincorporated Arapahoe County? Let's get started by jumping in with a quick poll question for you. This will help guide our discussion tonight, and we would love to know how familiar are you with the current oil and gas regulations in Arapahoe County. You can press the numbers on your phone or enter your answer below the video player if you're online. Press 1 for I'm new to the conversation. Press 2 for I've heard about it but don't know too much. Press 3 for I've been following along and attended meetings. Press 4 for I've been involved for years. Please record your answer now on the phone or online below the video player. Again, the options are I'm new to the conversation, 1, I've heard about it but don't know too much, 2, I've been following along and attended meetings, 3, or I've been involved for years, 4. We'll give you a few more seconds to get those answers recorded, and we'll let you know that next you'll hear from one of our commissioners to talk a little bit more about the topic. Okay, thank you all for letting us know your level of knowledge and engagement with Arapahoe County's oil and gas regulations so far. Looks like the majority of folks have been following along and attended meetings or been involved for years. Almost 80% of those on the call are in those categories. Now let's turn it over to Commissioner Jeff Baker with District 3. Commissioner, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this virtual public meeting. Whether you're participating online or on the phone, I hope you'll engage in the discussion tonight and learn more about how we've been working to draft the amendment to our Land Development Code to include oil and gas regulations for the unincorporated parts of our county. Our staff and the entire board has been committed to an open feedback process with the public and with stakeholders so that the draft rules represent a balanced approach to ensuring and maintaining quality of life, health, and safety for our residents without inhibiting responsible oil and gas development. As Jason mentioned, Colorado Senate Bill 181 established and defines the county's additional authority to regulate oil and gas surface operations within our jurisdiction. Please keep in mind that statewide regulations are in place through the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. However, any issue that is regulated by both the state and the county will always be subject to the more stringent rule. It's also important to keep in mind during tonight's discussion that we're focused on oil and gas surface activities, above the ground, like noise, visual appearance, and emergency response planning, to name just a few. We're not considering regulations for activities that occur below the ground because the state is better equipped to regulate these issues and because the county does not employ experts for what we call downhole operations. That wouldn't allow us to enforce regulations like this. The same goes for things like air quality. State agencies regulate and have the experts to enforce rules such as air quality. We're really looking forward to hearing from you tonight. By joining us during this process, you're supporting the guided growth of our communities. Thanks again for joining us. Now I'll turn it back to Jason for a quick poll question.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. To help guide and inform this discussion, let's get a little bit more information about who's on the call tonight. So if you could tell us which part of the county you live in. Again, you can press the corresponding numbers on your phone or enter your answer below the video player if you're online. Press 1 if you live west of I-25. Press 2 if you live between I-25 and E-470. Press 3 if you're between E-470 and Kiowa-Bennett Road. Press 4 if you're east of Kiowa-Bennett Road. And press 5 if you don't live in Arapahoe County or if you're affiliated with the oil and gas industry or a state agency. Again, west of I-25 is 1, between I-25 and E-470 is 2, between E-470 and Kiowa-Bennett Road is 3, east of Kiowa-Bennett Road is 4, and if you don't live in the county or are affiliated with oil and gas industry or a state agency, press 5. We'll be hearing again from Commissioner Jeff Baker in a few moments and give a few more seconds for people to enter their answers. It looks like we have people joining us from all over the county. It's great to see a variety of folks interested in our oil and gas regulations. Thank you very much for letting us know where you live. And Commissioner Baker, I'll turn it over to you for a brief review of the process so far. Yeah. Commissioner Baker, we're hoping you can talk a little bit about the process so far.
Sure. Sorry about that. I was muted. Welcome to everyone that has joined us since my initial discussion. I wanted to say that this guided growth is so important to our communities to provide and maintain an excellent quality of life for residents now and for future generations. It's critical that together with residents and industry representatives, we developed a balanced approach. I think that's something that we've talked about, a balanced approach to reducing the impacts of oil and gas development on nearby properties and our local infrastructure. We also aim to maintain a rural lifestyle for the eastern portion of the county while still allowing for responsible oil and gas development. The first phase of this process began back in the early part of 2019. Staff met with residents and stakeholders, including industry representatives, regulatory agencies, municipal partners, local fire and EMS, and our Office of Emergency Management, to name just a few. That first phase allowed the county to collect and prioritize the top issues. This resulted in topics that are categorized into 4 buckets: quality of life, health and safety, the process, and operations. Phase 2 occurred from mid-2019 through January of 2020. That phase involved a lot of research, public meetings, and a survey to further refine what was most important to our stakeholders. COVID-19 did set us back a little bit on our timeline, but our staff have dedicated more time to getting us to where we are now. Tonight, we'll discuss the draft regulations for your consideration and feedback. And after this discussion, we encourage you to take a survey and view the full draft of the regulations. You can also stay involved by attending upcoming public hearings with both our Planning Commission and our Board of County Commissioners for final review and decision making. Thank you again for joining us and for the opportunity to talk with you tonight. I'll remain on the line in case I can help answer questions. But Jason, back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker, for that great overview of the process so far. If you've jumped on the event recently, welcome. If you missed anything, the recording will be posted on our website tomorrow. And if you'd like to ask questions about oil and gas, you can submit questions online below the video player, or you can press *3 on your phone, or you can comment on Facebook. Now we will be joined by Brian Weimer, our Director of Public Works and Development, to present an overview of the draft regulations. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Jason, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us and answering the previous poll questions that we've had tonight. I see we have quite a few callers queued up and questions are coming in online. We'll get to those shortly. I'd like to take a few moments to talk and give you an overview of the draft regulations. Throughout the last 8 years, and particularly within the past year, we've heard from citizens, industry representatives, mineral right holders, local health departments, state agencies, utility companies, fire and emergency service providers, developers, home builders, and economic development partners. And it's been through these discussions and the data collection that we've been able to synthesize the issues associated with oil and gas into 4 buckets or categories. Those are 1, quality of life, 2, health and safety, 3, the process, and 4, operations. And I want to be clear about this tonight. We're only providing a high-level overview of the draft regulations, so we have ample time to take your questions. You can access the complete draft and take a survey online at www.arapahoegov, all one word, .com/oil and gas. And that's all one word and shown on that previous slide. So now let's get started and look closely at those particular issues. We'll start with quality of life. When you take the online survey, you'll learn more about noise, odor, light, visual appearance, traffic, wildlife, and nature. Under each category, the survey will outline the various mitigation measures that reduce impact to the community and surrounding infrastructure. For example, let's look at noise. Did you know that the average conversation with a friend or a family member measures approximately 60 decibels? Well, that's probably the level you hear me talking right now. Given that our draft regulations call for oil and gas companies to minimize decibel levels, no more than 65 decibels measured at the property line or the nearest occupied structure is being proposed. That's just one example of what you can expect to review in the online survey for each of the issues, including odor, light, visual appearance, traffic, wildlife, and nature. Now let's go to category number 2, and that is health and safety. I'll give you a brief summary so that you can get to the questions and answers, and you'll find those details on the website. Under health and safety, draft regulations address emergency response, water, and setbacks. The safety of our community and first responders should an incident occur is the utmost importance for the county. For example, the regulations call out for the necessity for oil and gas companies to work and train side by side with first responders in our Office of Emergency Management to mitigate the possibility of incidents, but also to appropriately prepare those responders if an incident would occur. Additionally, you'll see more detail online in the online survey about state standards for well water testing and how county also will require sampling. You probably heard the term setback. Right now, there are evolving conversations happening at the state level, and whatever regulations is more restrictive, let it be the state or local government, will be enforced. So there's more to come on that changing issue. But let's put it into perspective. Think about setbacks as a tool, not a standalone item. Setbacks help to mitigate some of the impacts that we take about or that we talk about under quality of life. If well pads are further away, it might be easier to adhere to regulations regarding noise and odor. Setbacks can also be tied to safety. So again, please review the draft regulations in its entirety and give us your thoughts through the survey. And that is shown on your screen again. We've got two more categories, so bear with me. Let's talk about the process now. We believe it's critical for the community to be informed about oil and gas operations, early and often. The process or the proposed rules call out best practices in making sure the community receives and can access information about what is going to occur near them. Process regulations would also address approvals and waivers. For example, once an oil and gas operation has been approved, the operator must break ground within 3 years or their approval will expire. That is another proposal we have within the regulations. And the last category that I'll talk about is operations. Operational regulations cover the way an oil and gas site is managed, which is equally important as to how it is developed. Our draft rules cover security fencing, containment methods, and storage of hazardous materials, just to name a few items. These ensure that the highest safety standards are in place. The proposed regulations are drafted from an information gathered during stakeholder meetings and public outreach process, and were evaluated based on a set of criteria which included the following. Those would be, and I think you can see them on the screen, the impact on the public, alignment with state rules, best management practices, impact on the industry, and impact to county resources. Considering each of these criteria help to achieve a balanced approach, as Commissioner Baker talked about, that considers the interest of all those who are impacted. It also allows for a tiered approach. And that tiered approach is an example where if we had a well pad in a remote or on a remote property far from residential development, as a number of our wells are, the operator may not be required to adhere to all the same requirements that a well pad near a residential development would be subject to. This allows us flexibility in site location and operations. Wow, that was a lot. I know that was a lot of information to digest, so I want to remind you that you can view the full draft of regulations and provide your responses to each of these issues I just presented through the online survey, again shown at that website, www.arapahogov.com/oil and gas. I'm going to turn it back to Jason, and we'll open the lines up for questions and answers, and I think we have till 8 o'clock to do that. So we welcome all your questions tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. Now let's kick off tonight's live Q&A with our first online question from the public. Remember, if you would like to ask a question, you can enter it below the video player online or from your phone by pressing *3, or you can drop us a comment on Facebook. We have our first online question for tonight. Alexis from Aurora would like to know, why is the county creating rules now prior to the state completing its rulemaking process? And Brian, would you be able to handle that question?
Yes, and thank you, Alexis, for that question. And it really doesn't seem like rushing to us, that's for sure. Staff's been working on these draft rules for over a year, conducting stakeholder meetings, using stakeholder input, and doing various surveys to obtain input, as well as updating our Board of County Commissioners on a regular basis. Staff met with the Board of County Commissioners 9 times since November 2019 to discuss the implications associated with Senate Bill 19-181 and to explain our draft rules. We also conducted 12 stakeholder meetings in 2019, and thus far, staff has conducted 4 stakeholder meetings in 2020, not including this telephone town hall that we're handling tonight. It was decided when the process began some year and a half ago that the staff would complete the draft rules and present them to the Board of County Commissioners for adoptions before the end of 2020. So to us, it doesn't seem like we're really rushing these. And we've been very diligent in terms of looking at these and moving the regulations forward. So thank you for your call, and hopefully that answers your question.
All right, thank you, Brian. Our next question comes from online, and Janice would like to know what the proposed setbacks are. And we have Diane Kosis, our energy specialist with the county, available to answer that question for you. Thank you for the question, Janice.
Hello, Janice. Our draft rules have a setback of 1,000 feet from the edge of the drilling pad to the nearest occupied structure. And they also have to have that pad 250 feet from the nearest property line so that the owner of an adjacent property would not be unduly jeopardized by having the pad very close to their property line. However, since we drafted that draft rule, the state, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, has been conducting hearings and getting stakeholder input. It looks like the oil and gas commissioners are headed towards a setback of 2,000 feet, but they have not made a decision yet, and that would be forthcoming in probably the next 2 months or so.
All right. Thank you, Diane. Our next question is also from online, from Jenny, who is asking if there is a provision for shutting down fracking operations until violations are fixed, instead of just levying a fine for a limited number of days. And Diane, again, would you be available to answer that one?
That's a tough question, really. The state would levy fines on a daily basis for violations. It would really be up to them to decide whether or not the operation would need to be stopped. It's drilling and fracking both proceed on a 24/7 basis once the process is started. So I would say it would be unlikely that the state would start with a shutdown. They would most likely impose fines and see if the problem could be corrected within a day or two. I hope that helps.
All right. Thank you, Diane. And next we'll go to a caller. We have Nancy from Byers, Colorado, who has a question about mineral rights.
Township 57 West, Section 20 and 28. There's a lot of oil out there, and it's equal to what the old Peoria field is. So let's drill out there. We'll be glad to have you drill out there. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy. This is Commissioner Baker. Thank you for your question. We appreciate it. The county does not get involved in making decisions about where oil and gas industry is going to drill or not. That's something that they have the experts. They have geologists and they have bumper trucks and a lot of things like that to determine where the oil is. They just submit their application to us and to the Colorado, the COGCC, when they've determined where they want to drill. So we really don't direct people where to drill. But thank you for your question.
All right. Thank you for the answer, Commissioner Baker. We have another online question. This question is regarding rules for air quality. Why is the county not drafting rules for air quality? Air contaminants from oil and gas are one of the biggest health risk factors. And Diane, would you be able to answer that for us?
Yes. Staff received direction from the Board of County Commissioners not to draft rules for air quality or air quality monitoring based on two reasons. One, the county does not have an air quality specialist. And two, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or CDPHE, Air Quality Control Division, was going to adopt new rules for oil and gas operations when we got that direction from the board. Recently, in the last 10 to 14 days, I believe, the State Health Department did adopt new stricter rules for oil and gas air quality at the end of September. Right now, the CDPHE has a summary of their new air quality rules on their website. So you'd be able to check those out, or you could contact us if you have any trouble finding those new rules.
All right. Thank you, Diane. We're going to take a quick break from the Q&A discussion to do another poll question. When we talk about quality of life, what is the most important topic you think the county should address? Press the numbers on your phone or enter your answer below the video player if you're online. Press 1 for noise, 2 for odor, press 3 for light, press 4 for visual appearance, press 5 for traffic, and press 6 for preserving wildlife and nature. That's noise 1, odor 2, light 3, visual appearance 4, traffic 5, preserving wildlife and nature 6. We'll give a couple more moments for everyone to enter their answers, either on the phone or below the video player. Okay. Thank you all for letting us know what is most important to quality of life. Looks like half of the respondents say traffic is most important, with odor and preserving wildlife and nature as the second and third categories of importance. Appreciate that feedback. We'll get back to the Q&A session now with Anne, who has a question online. Anne is wondering what the overall impact a setback of 1,000 feet would have on extraction of minerals, and what percentage of extraction is currently within 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet of residences. And I'd ask Diane, who is our oil and gas and energy specialist, who's had experience with a number of oil and gas applications over the years, to respond to that question.
Well, thank you for that question, and it's a really good one. I'm going to answer your second part first. Over the past 8 years or so, most of the oil and gas wells that have been drilled in the county have actually been about 1,000 feet or a little over from the nearest occupied structure. We haven't had any drilled 2,000 feet or so from the nearest occupied structure, unless however, there are wells on the state land board property that are more than a mile from the nearest structure. We feel like the 1,000-foot setback is not going to have a very big impact on industry. However, we are collecting comments from industry stakeholders as well about our draft rules. And we will be summarizing all our stakeholder comments and providing those for everyone's review.
All right. Thank you, Diane. We have another online question from Mark, who is asking if there is any consideration of grandfathering wells permitted to date from setback limits.
Actually, Mark, any wells that have already been permitted would not be subject to our new rules when they are adopted.
Okay, so existing wells and permitted wells would not be affected by these.
Right.
All right. Great, thank you. We have another online question. This one is regarding county roads and why are repairs or the funding requirements for county roads not addressed in the draft rules. And for that, I'll turn to Brian Weimer, our Public Works Director.
Thank you, Jason. And you know, this question really aligns with the poll question that you had previously, where 50% of the respondents thought traffic was one of the major things we should consider. So with regard to the question, the maintenance agreement between the county and the operator for repair and damage of county roadways caused by construction of well pads is currently required. The new rules will require a maintenance agreement as well to cover any operator damage sustained by the county roads during construction, drilling or fracking to be required. So we'll be requiring that, and that's a suggestion in our regulations. In addition, staff are currently meeting with the Board of County Commissioners to propose adoption of a traffic impact fee for oil and gas operations. This fee, if it was imposed, would be collected and could be used for improvements such as installing shoulders or installing a pavement overlay or replacing gravel roadways with asphalt. It's based on the impact of the oil and gas industry on those roads. Under state statute, road repairs cannot be funded from impact fees and can only be financed from property taxes or a maintenance agreement. And that's why we're proposing both at this point in time. So hopefully that answers your question, and thank you for asking it.
All right, thank you, Brian. Our next question is from Jenny regarding schools and how close are operations allowed to be near schools or occupied homes. Is Arapahoe County planning to make this more stringent than the 2,000-foot setback that the state is considering, since serious health effects occur within a mile radius? And for that, I'll turn to Diane Kosis again.
Hello, Jenny. The county setbacks, the draft setback rules are for 1,000 feet from the nearest occupied structure. However, after we drafted that rule, the COGCC came up with a suggestion amongst their commissioners of 2,000 feet for a setback from a well to schools, or from a well pad boundary to schools. And the stricter standard would apply whoever had the stricter standard, if it was the county or the state. And at this time, we have no plans to set a larger setback of a mile radius. But your comment will definitely be recorded as part of our stakeholder comments. So we do appreciate your comment.
All right, thank you, Diane. We'll now go to a caller who's been waiting on the line. We have Sonia from Arapahoe County, who has a question about emissions and public health and safety. So if we could get Sonia live, that would be wonderful.
Is most important if you had, can you hear me? I think that the question
yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Super. The question that you all asked regarding which is most important left out, I think, a significant concern for many of us, and that is the ability to breathe non-toxic air. And although you indicated that the commissioners don't feel that you have the capacity to assess that, you do have the capacity at no additional cost to do several things. One is to require the operator to submit their APEN, which is their essentially their application to Colorado Air Quality Commission, where they, several months down the line, they would submit saying how much they estimate they will be emitting of hazardous gases and so on. And you could ask them to submit that at the front end of their application, and that way you would have a ballpark idea of the total emissions they're planning to emit in terms of hazardous emissions at no cost, additional cost to you or the operator, and yet giving everyone an idea of what kind of total emissions will be there. And this is important because under the new SB 181 law, there is supposed to be an effort to assess cumulative impact. And in order to know cumulative impact, you have to have an idea of what the emissions are coming from that operation and what the yearly amount would be. And you can check with CDPHE also to assess areas where you think there are numerous sources of hazardous emissions to do an independent baseline. But I think that's very important for everybody to have an idea of what kind of hazardous emissions each project is posing. And as I said, doing that in that way would be at no additional cost to the county or the operator. So I would very much suggest that you consider that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sonia. Really appreciate that feedback, and I think I'll rely on Diane to provide an initial response, but that's also something that we'll take in consideration as we're evaluating the overall regulations and taking them forward for public hearings. Diane?
Sonia, the public does have an opportunity to comment on the applications we receive, and if we hear concerns from citizens about air quality or cumulative impacts from more than one pad, we could include CDPHE as a referral agency for the process. And as you know, cumulative impacts are something that will be addressed by and evaluated by COGCC. So I would encourage you, when you see a new application come up, to let us know if you would like us to include CDPHE as a referral agency.
All right. Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Sonia, for the question and comments. We'll move to another online question. This one is about 24/7 operations and why do we allow nighttime drilling and fracking? And I'll ask Diane Kosis to respond to that one.
Both drilling and fracking operations are conducted on a 24/7 basis for a number of reasons. Once drilling commences, drilling cannot be paused because the hole would collapse or widen to the point that a proper cement job to attach the steel casing to the wall of the hole would not be possible. It would be very difficult to squeeze the cement into a widened hole. So it's also important to know that drilling mud is circulated through the drilling bit during drilling, which coats the hole with drilling mud to keep it from collapsing and widening. And so if they were to stop drilling, they would not be able to circulate that mud to keep the hole in good shape. Fracking arrangements are usually scheduled to occur after the hole is cased and cemented. Horizontal holes are fracked at different intervals along the hole, which can take more than a day to complete. It's never known how long fracking will take exactly. It can be estimated. Once fracking begins, it continues until the last interval is fracked. While the fracturing of rock can't be heard or felt at the surface, the pumps and the fans on the surface of the pad during fracking do make up the noisiest part of the process.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Our next question is another online question. This question is, why does the county not have draft rules for alternative location analyses? And I'll turn to Brian Weimer for an answer to that one.
Okay, thank you. And I'll use some acronyms, but I'll talk about that and what those are. So the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, COGCC, is in the process of adopting requirements for these alternative location analysis, and we call them ALAs. Staff would consider any of those rules to be duplicative if we would adopt some. So if they're moving forward with requiring it, we don't see that there's a need for the county to do that as well. So hopefully that's a simple question or a simple answer to your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Next online question is regarding some of the wording that was in the draft rules. Why are the words possible or technologically feasible or economically practical included in those draft rules? And for that, I will again turn to Diane Kosis.
Good question. Certain draft rules require mitigations or technology that may or may not be feasible to implement or implement at the time of pad construction or drilling. An example would be lightning mitigation. Staff has noted that well pad fires are often started by lightning strikes to tanks, to the large on-site storage tanks. Lightning mitigation techniques are under development in the U.S. and other countries, but they have not been proven to always reduce the risk of a fire started by a lightning strike. Staff anticipates that future technologies will enable a reduction in the incidence of fires initiated by lightning. In the meantime, our draft rules do have a requirement for the installation of some form of lightning mitigation. So as with lightning mitigations, there are other new evolving technologies that we believe will be very helpful in mitigating the impacts of oil and gas and also of making operations safer for everybody concerned.
All right, thank you for all your questions. Go ahead and turn to another quick poll. Press the numbers on your phone or enter your answer below the video player if you happen to be online. The question is, when we talk about health and safety, what is the most important topic you think the county should address? Press 1 for emergency response, 2 for water, 3 for the use of setbacks. That's emergency response 1, water 2, use of setbacks 3. So please record your answer now on the phone or online below the video player, and we'll wait a few more seconds for everyone to respond to the question. All right, it looks like the majority, nearly 2/3 of the respondents have said that emergency response is the most important aspect of health and safety. Really appreciate that feedback, and let's get back to the questions and answers. Next up is an online question about the impact of the proposed rules on the oil and gas industry. Will the new state and county rules drive industry away from Arapahoe County entirely? And for a response to that, we'll once again ask Brian Weimer to talk.
Thanks, Jason, and thank you for your question. And that's really appropriate when we're looking at our rules and trying to provide a balanced approach. You know, staff has strived to draft the new rules that allow oil and gas companies to operate in Arapahoe County while reducing the impacts to neighboring citizens. We recognize that mineral rights are a private property right, and Arapahoe County and the commissioners are very aware of that, and recognizing that many of our citizens hold those mineral rights. We've heard one of them tonight that expressed that concern. Additionally, the draft rules allow for a variance process, and operators can make the case for fewer mitigation if they can demonstrate that public health, the environment, or wildlife will not be impacted by proposed pads and wells. So staff cannot evaluate if the COGCC or CDPHE rules will result in conditions that make drilling uneconomical in the county or in the state. But we're trying to be aware and provide a balanced approach to both the citizens, the residents, the property owners, as well as our oil and gas operators. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Really appreciate it, Brian. The next question comes from online from Edith, who is wondering how to receive notification of new permits. Go ahead, Diane.
Edith, our planning division website has new applications, new land development applications on it. And so you'd be able to look at new applications online that way. We're considering also changing the oil and gas webpage to make it easier to search for applications that are specific to oil and gas development. I hope that helps.
All right. Thank you, Diane. And our website does also feature a map of current planning cases that are under review. So when we do receive an oil and gas application, that map is updated automatically with the location of the application. And that's another resource you can find online for oil and gas applications. Our next question is from online as well. Maria asking how the new regulations will affect the 1041 process. And for those who are not familiar with the entire Colorado revised statutes, the 1041 process is something that's also known as areas and activities of state interest, which is a category of land use applications that include utility corridors like power lines. In the case of Arapahoe County, it includes gas pipelines, oil pipelines, major facilities of utility companies. So those have a public hearing process involved, And with that, I'll turn it over to Diane for specifically how these new regulations might affect that process.
Well, Maria, the draft rules that we're working on right now apply to oil and gas well pads, and those are never processed through the 1041 evaluation. However, when we are done with our draft rules and some or most of them are adopted, we will start a process of looking at new rules for pipelines and a way to try to shorten the 1041 process, because the pipeline applications take about 7 to 9 months for us to process because of all of the requirements, environmental assessments and cultural resource assessments, and those applications are generally on the order of about 1,000 pages, and we'd like to reduce some of those requirements to make the pipeline application process more efficient for both the county and for the applicants. That's really it, because well pads and compressor pads that would be covered in our by our draft rules are not would not be subject to the 1041 process.
All right. Thank you, Diane. We will turn to another online question about noise. And why did the county draft the noise limit at 65 decibels? And is that mid-frequency noise or low-frequency noise or both? And for that, I'll turn to Diane.
The mid-frequency noise are also referred to as decibel A or dBA, and the low-frequency noise is referred to as decibel C or dBc. The county's rules apply to both dBA and dBc. But first, as a point of reference, I want to mention that normal conversation between two people is in the range of 60 decibels, and standing in a running shower is about 70 decibels. The proposed 65 decibel limit is for, as I mentioned, for both dBA mid-range frequencies and dBc low frequencies. Staff is proposing an upper limit of 65 decibels for both dBA and dBc because that would match the Colorado Department of Transportation's limit for road noise in residential areas. CDOT set their limit at 65 decibels. It's also important to note that sound walls can lower the noise levels by 10 to 15 decibels for mid-range frequencies, dBA, and sound walls can lower low-frequency noise by 3 decibels. After the county drafted the proposed noise limit of 65 decibels, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, or COGCC, set statewide day and night limits of 60 dBA and 65 dBc during fracking, which is the noisiest part of the process. Unlike the prior COGCC rules, they would now prohibit noise surges at night. However, during the day, operators under COGCC rules could have levels of 70 to 75 decibels in 15-minute intervals. The county's rule, however, would not allow those 15-minute surges in noise. Drilling and fracking would need to be below 65 decibels at all times.
Okay, thank you for that, Diane. Really appreciate all of this robust discussion tonight. I'd like to do a quick poll about process improvements. And remember, you can press the numbers on your phone or enter your answer below the video player if you're online. When we're talking about process improvements, what's the most important topic that you think the county should address? Press 1 for notification to the community, or 2 for how operations are approved in the process to apply for waivers. So notification to the community, 1. How oil and gas operations are approved and the process they use to apply for waivers, 2. Please record your answer on the phone or online below the video player, and we'll wait a few seconds for those responses to come in. All right, thank you everyone for recording those responses. Looks like how operations are approved and the process to apply for waivers is a favorite with 57%. Appreciate the feedback on that. Would like to let you know that we have time for just a few more questions. Once again, really appreciate you joining us this evening. Please do view the draft regulations and take the survey at www.arapahogov.com/oil-and-gas. Our call screeners are still logging questions that our staff will be responding to after tonight's event. So if you have additional questions, you can speak with the screeners or enter those questions. We'll now turn to an online question regarding new technologies. Who will monitor new technologies that operators should incorporate into their standard operating procedures? How can you enforce the adoption of new technology? And Brian, would you be able to answer that one?
Yeah, so I can answer that one, and really I'd like to hand this off, and I will hand this off as a responsibility to somebody who's on this call. It will be the responsibility of the engineer or the energy specialist or the oil and gas specialist. And you've heard from her tonight, and that's Diane currently. And that responsibility will be to monitor new technologies available to the oil and gas industry. And any of those new technologies and its applicability will be discussed at the annual operator meetings that we're setting into place, and those discussions will occur. So I think we have that in place as part of the regulations, and I think it's appropriate to use technology as we move forward and see how that would be applicable within Arapahoe County. So Diane will certainly be competent to handle all those questions, and another just part of her role that she has to do as part of being an oil and gas specialist within Arapahoe County. So thank you for that question.
All right, appreciate the response. We have another online question from Jenny, who is asking if there's a plan for what happens when developers go bankrupt and who foots the bill for cleanup. Could the county include a provision for cleanup of drilling sites? And as one of the drafters of the proposed regulations, I'll turn to Diane again for a response to that one.
Well, Jenny, we do address the possibility that an operator could go bankrupt with our draft rules by having financial insurance and financial assurance requirements in our draft rules. So that we, the county, would require insurance above the levels that the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation currently requires. And part of, there'd be different kinds of insurance, which you can check out in our draft rules, but environmental cleanup or remediation would be covered by a bond that the operators would have to submit at the time of approval to cover those situations. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you. We'll now turn to caller Jennifer. Has a question about tax revenue, and if we could get Jennifer live so we could listen to her question. That would be wonderful.
Hello.
We're ready to hear from you now, Jennifer.
Hi, I was just curious what the county tax revenue is versus what they are expending in staff and oversight for things like this.
All right. So the question I heard was, what's the extent of the tax revenue that the county receives from oil and gas? And either Brian or Diane may have that information handy, so hopefully one of you can respond.
I'll take a shot at it, and as I mentioned before, we're looking at what the transportation impact fee might be associated with oil and gas. And one of the issues that we looked up was generally what are they paying? And it's a complicated formula that's being utilized. And essentially, personal property like equipment and those sorts of things are taxed at a non-residential rate of 29%. The production is taxed at a rate of 87.5%. So that's based on the production of a particular well. The last that I received from our finance department was that the counties, of the 11 mills that we received, plus these additional taxes, property taxes at that 87.5, was about $1.5 million. Of that, roughly 62,000 went to Road and Bridge, which was roughly about 4% of the taxes that we received. So hopefully that gives you a general idea of, at least this year, what we were looking at. And that's the latest information that I have.
All right. Thank you, Brian. And we have reached the end of our allotted time. We did not get to all of the questions and callers this evening. So if you did not end up getting your question answered this evening, please do speak with the screener so we can get the specific question answered by one of our staff following the meeting. As a reminder, you can visit www.arapahoegov.com/oil-and-gas to access the survey. You can review the draft regulations and find more details about upcoming public hearings with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. Just want to say really appreciate everyone who participated in the meeting this evening, and do hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you so much.
The